Thomas Stonewall Jackson, Tom or Stone, to his friends and family, eagerly awaited the upcoming weekend as he drove home from work that day. Monday was Memorial Day, but he and Janice, with whom he had spent 5 years, were invited to spend a 4-day weekend at her boss Darren Hanson's country estate. Darren was the senior partner at the law firm where Janice worked as a legal assistant. Since Tom already had Monday off, he took a day off on Friday to extend his weekend. His boss, who also happened to be his father, was kind enough to let him leave early on Thursday so he could pack and hit the road. The trip to Darren's estate would easily take 3 hours, considering the highway traffic and the narrow winding roads leading to the estate. He had high hopes for the weekend. The past 2 months with Janice hadn't been the best. She had become moody, snapping at him without any apparent reason. And sex? Forget about it. What used to be a 3 or 4 evenings a week excitement had turned into maybe begrudging once every 2 weeks exercise. Being a caring and loving husband, Stone turned to Janice, hoping to help her overcome whatever was troubling her. But she simply brushed him off, saying she would deal with it herself. What's worse, Janice consistently rebuffed his attempts to initiate sex or any physical contact and now often flinched away from him when he tried to hug or comfort her. The situation was becoming unbearable for him, and he wondered if she was having an affair. Then she told him they were invited to her boss's country estate for the weekend to celebrate her promotion. A promotion at work? Tom asked, bewildered. You never mentioned anything about a promotion at work. How long has this been in the works? For a couple of months now, Janice replied. I'm sorry, I should have told you sooner. So that's why you've been so distant with me lately? I think so. I'm sorry, honey. I didn't mean to be such a bitch to you. I've had a lot on my mind lately, she replied apologetically. Tom smiled, pulling her into his arms, but his heart sank a little when she flinched slightly. I can imagine, he said. And to think, I was worried you might be having an affair. He felt her tense slightly, but then she relaxed. Of course not, Janice said. I would never do anything like that to you. He heard her words, but something in her tone sounded unconvincing. I'm glad to hear that, Tom forced himself to reply, despite growing unease. Because that's just something I couldn't tolerate. I know, Janice said quietly. So, do you think you can get off early on Friday? 4 days out in nature would do us both good. Sure, I have plenty of free time. We can leave on Thursday after I finish work, if you'd like. That would be wonderful. I'll let Darren know, and by the time you get home, everything will be packed, she said. I promise, these will be weekends you'll never forget. Stone pondered her words as he filled his new pickup with gas. Weekends he'd never forget? He could only hope she meant that in a good way, but a part of him was feeling conflicted, especially after a rather serious conversation he had earlier with his father and uncle. He pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and headed into the house. True to her word, Janice had packed everything and prepared it for loading into the truck. He checked his bags, ensuring his belongings were packed and ready to go. He was impressed that Janice had even packed his toiletries into his travel bag. Then he grabbed the other bags. You've got enough stuff here for a week, he joked when she walked into the room in cut-off shorts and a t-shirt. I thought we were just going out of town for the weekend. You know me, I like to be prepared for everything, she joked back. Why don't you load up this stuff, and I'll finish up here? He noticed sandwiches on her counter and she was assembling a picnic basket with snacks and drinks for the road, as she typically did when they took day trips on weekends. Sounds enticing, he said with a smile. Maybe these will turn out to be good weekends after all, he thought. He loaded everything into the truck, helped Janice finish packing up the food, locked up the house, and set off for what he fervently hoped would be a great weekend getaway. This weekend promises to be the best of my life, exclaimed Janice as Tom drove. Trust me, you're going to have a great time. I'm looking forward to it, replied Tom, hoping she was serious. It took Tom longer than planned to get out of the city due to a highway accident that brought traffic to a standstill, delaying them by nearly 2 hours. But it didn't dampen Janice's cheerful mood, which pleased Tom. He refueled once more as they got back on the road leading to Darren's estate, then drove along the windy road through hilly wooded terrain. It was well past midnight by the time they reached the gates to Darren's expansive 2-story house. Janice had the gate code, and soon they pulled up to the massive brick mansion. Damn, that's a freaking huge house, exclaimed Tom. 3 men in dark suits and sunglasses approached the truck as Tom turned off the engine. Tom wondered aloud, why do they need sunglasses in the dark? I can grab our luggage, Tom offered, opening the pickup's rear door. Either way, thanks. No, sir, it's our job, said one of the men in a humorless tone. Another man reached out his hand. The keys, sir. I need to park your car, said the other man. Please, just do as they ask, dear, suggested Janice in a tone that made it clear he should obey these men. He looked at the man requesting the keys and noticed a distinct bulge on his jacket indicating he was armed. Of course, Tom said grimly, handing his keys to the second man, while the other two men briskly grabbed his luggage and disappeared into the darkness without a word. Thank you, Tom said mechanically. He watched as the men effortlessly carried the heavy bags up the steps. Are you coming? Asked Janice. Yes, of course. On my way, Tom replied. He followed Janice and the two men up the stairs, puzzled as to why they needed to be armed. Something about this just didn't seem right. Ah, there you are. I hope you had a safe journey, boomed a tall man with dark curly hair as they entered. Tom recognized him as Darren Hansen. He had met Darren a few times at corporate holiday events. Before Tom's eyes, Janice and the man exchanged hugs. Then he turned to Tom. Thomas, glad to see you again. I'm Darren Hansen, he introduced himself, extending his hand. Welcome to my humble abode. Thank you. Nice to see you again, Mr. Hansen, said Tom, shaking Darren's hand. No need to be so formal, Tom. Can I call you Tom? I have a feeling we'll be seeing much more of each other, Darren said with a slight smile. Especially now that your wife is advancing in the firm. Of course, Tom replied. Sorry we're late. There was an accident on the highway, explained Janice. Yes, I heard about it, Darren said. I'm glad you made it here safely. Are the others here? Asked Janice. Others? Tom didn't know there would be others here. Yes, they're all here. Unfortunately, they decided to turn in early. Wanted to get a good rest before tomorrow's celebration, Darren replied. The man who had taken Tom's keys returned through the front door and handed them back to Tom. Thank you, Tom said, putting the keys in his pocket. By this time, the two men who had taken their luggage returned from the second floor. Harold, escort the Jacksons to their room, if you would, Darren ordered. Yes, sir, said one of the sturdy men. We'll see you early tomorrow morning, Darren said. Sweet dreams. Thank you, Janice said softly, modestly lowering her eyes. Tom noticed but didn't say anything. He just filed it away in the back of his mind. Maybe Dad was right, he thought. Right this way, please, commanded Harold in a dead, creaky voice. Tom and Janice followed the man up a spiral staircase and down two corridors before stopping at a locked door. He pulled out a key card and held it to the reader, and Tom heard the door unlock. Harold opened the door and gestured for them to enter the room. Oh my, sighed Janice as they stepped inside. The room was spacious and well furnished. There was even a private bathroom with a double vanity and a large television monitor on the wall opposite the queen-sized bed. A gas fireplace dominated one wall. It's very nice here, said Tom with forced cheerfulness, looking around. I'm glad you approve, said Harold. He pulled out two key cards, handing one to Janice and the other to Tom. These are your room keys. Please keep them with you at all times. Breakfast will be served tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. Good night. Good night, Janice replied as Harold exited the room, closing the door behind him. It's a really nice room, commented Tom, walking around and taking inventory. Yes, it is, agreed Janice, as Tom began to hang his clothes in the closet. Janice unpacked her things, but Tom noticed she simply placed her bag of clothes in the closet without taking anything out beforehand. So, who are these other people that Darren mentioned would be here? He asked. Oh, just some big shots from the company, Janice replied, not looking at him. And this new position, what exactly does it entail? Tom followed up. I'm Darren's new executive assistant, Janice told him. It comes with a significant pay raise. But from time to time, I'll have to travel. Is that okay with you? As long as it doesn't disrupt our life, Tom said. You know, we've talked about starting a family. I know, but I might have to postpone that for a while, Janice said quietly. At least until I settle into my new role. What kind of time frame are you talking about? Tom asked. I'm not sure. Maybe 6 months. Maybe a little longer. Are you okay with that? She asked. I know this job is important to you. Tom replied neutrally, wondering about the implications of this position and knowing they aren't getting any younger. You have no idea, Janice told him. This is a huge step for me. All I ask for is a little time and patience. Fair enough, Tom said, wrapping his arms around his wife. You know I'm very proud of you, don't you? Really? Janice asked in a quiet voice. Of course, he replied, kissing her on the lips. I love you, Janice. Never forget that. I love you too, Stone, she replied. After they climbed into bed and turned off the light, Tom reached out to Janice, but her eyes were closed and she seemed to be asleep. He sighed, knowing this had been her habit for the past 2 months. Disappointed, he turned onto his side and fell asleep. The sky was clear, dark blue, without a single hint of a cloud. The sun was high, and a gentle breeze blew from the south. Suddenly, the sky darkened and was covered with large menacing clouds. The light breeze turned into a sharp wind that grew stronger with each moment. A deep rumble was heard as the sky darkened and clouds gathered. In the distance, a brief flash of lightning was visible as storm clouds thickened and the wind intensified. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck the ground right at his feet. When he looked down, he saw a beating heart, pumping blood onto the ground. Tom had seen this dream many times, except for the beating heart. And every time he experienced it, someone he knew would die within the next 72 hours. The last time was 3 years ago. 2 days later, his older brother Andrew was killed by a drunk driver on the spot. A year before that, his mother had a stroke just 12 hours after his dream, and she passed away within 24 hours without regaining consciousness. Sitting up in bed, Tom was drenched in sweat. He glanced at the digital clock on the bedside table and saw that it was 4:15 a.m. Though it was very early, Tom knew he had to reach out to his father. Grabbing his phone from the bedside table, Tom noticed that he had no signal. He carefully got out of bed, trying not to wake Janice, put on his pants and a shirt, then slipped on his shoes. Grabbing his keycard, he opened the door and saw one of Darren's armed guards at a small table in the hallway. The man in a dark suit and sunglasses looked up as Tom opened the door. "Any issues, Mr. Jackson?" asked the big man. "I need to use the phone, but there's no cell service here," said Tom. "Who are you planning to call?" "I need to call my father." "It's important," Tom told him. "This way, sir," said the man, getting up. Tom followed him into a smaller room adjacent to the corridor. "You can use this phone," he added, pointing to the phone on a small table next to a chair. "Just dial 9 for an outside line." "Thank you," said Tom, settling into the chair. He began dialing his father's number and noticed the man standing in the doorway. "Could I have some privacy, please?" "Of course," said the guard, turning away from the door. Tom couldn't believe the patience of this person. And why was he armed? He finished dialing the number and waited. His father picked up after the third ring. "Hello, who is this?" asked his father. Tom could tell the elderly man had just been awakened. "Hi, Dad. It's me, Tom. Sorry to call so early. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. I was in the middle of a very nice dream, remembering your mom, but I'm okay, Tom." "Did you have another one of your dreams?" "Yes," Tom said quietly. He heard his father sigh on the other end of the line. "The same kind you had before Andy's accident?" his father asked. "Exactly the same," said Tom. "I see. Thanks for letting me know, son. I'm fine, but I'll keep my ear to the ground. Why don't you try to get some more sleep, okay?" "I will, Dad. I just wanted you to know," Tom told him. "I appreciate that, son. But I'm okay. I promise you'll have me around for a while longer," his father assured him. "Remember what I said, and watch your back." They ended the call, and Tom returned to his room. "Everything okay?" asked the guard. "Yes, everything's fine. Thank you," Tom said before opening the door to his room. He undressed and climbed back into bed, and Jen sighed, turning to face him. "Where did you go? Is everything okay?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, everything is just fine. I had to call Dad," Tom said. "Oh," she groaned before rolling over again. From her breathing, Tom could tell she had fallen asleep once more. He closed his eyes, but sleep eluded him for another hour as he continued to ponder the troubling dream. Tom got out of bed at 6 a.m. and headed to the bathroom to attend to his morning duties. Afterward, he quickly showered, then changed into clean jeans and a polo shirt. Jen followed him into the bathroom, first opening the blinds. Approaching the nightstand, Tom picked up his watch, wallet, and glanced out the window. He noticed wrought iron bars attached to the outside of the window and wondered why they were there. There was no balcony, and the concrete pad of the driveway approach should have been at least 8 meters high. Looking outside, Tom saw a helicopter landing on a pad at least 50 meters from the house. He hadn't noticed it before, but it had been dark when they arrived last night. He also noticed guards carrying what looked like rifles over their shoulders. Tom couldn't help but wonder, was Darren expecting trouble? "Are you ready for breakfast, dear?" asked Jen as she emerged from the bathroom. "Ready as ever," said Tom, checking his wristwatch. "What happened last night?" she asked. "Another dream," said Tom. "You mean like before your brother was killed?" "Yes, exactly the same. I called Dad to make sure he was okay." "How is he?" she asked. "Great. I caught him in the middle of a dream." "I bet," chuckled Jen, which seemed vaguely unsettling to him as she finished getting dressed. "Oh well, let's go downstairs and have breakfast. I'm starving." "Don't forget your cane," she reminded Tom. The cane had been a gift from his father, given to Tom after he was discharged from the hospital many years ago. During his service in Iraq, the Humvee in which he was riding was hit by an enemy RPG. 2 other Marines in the vehicle were killed instantly, while Tom and another Marine managed to escape. Despite severe injuries, the 2 Marines were able to take cover and defend themselves until help arrived. Tom spent months in an operating and rehabilitation center and eventually was medically discharged. Fortunately, doctors saved Tom's leg, but he had to have his left thigh replaced. The rehabilitation center helped Tom learn to walk again, greatly aided by a cane. Although he could now move normally, he still experienced pain after prolonged walking, so he continued to use his father's gift. They approached Darren's table and found 3 more men and a woman waiting for them. Tom had briefly met these men before and knew they were Darren's law firm leaders, although he couldn't recall their names. He had never seen or met this woman before. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce my husband, Thomas Stonewall Jackson," announced Jen. Tom shook hands with the others. "Stonewall, huh? That's quite an unusual name," remarked Glenn Oldman, one of the firm's leaders. "My parents were big fans of Grand Ole Opry back in the day, so they named me after their favorite country and western singer from the 50s and 60s, Tom replied. "Dad used to joke that it was either that or Michael Stonewall Jackson." "Yes, I think I recall that name," Glenn replied with a smile. "He passed away about 10 years ago, didn't he?" "That's what I heard," Tom replied. The woman smiled as Tom took her hand. "I'm glad to finally meet you, Mr. Jackson. I've heard a lot about you." "I'm Eva Carson," she said. "Nice to meet you, Miss Carson. Please, call me Tom. I hope you've heard at least a few good things." "So, what do you do at the firm?" Tom asked. "I'm in charge of training and staff recruitment," Eva told him. "And please, don't hesitate to call me Eva. I've heard a lot of good things, and I have a feeling we'll be spending a lot of time together this weekend." "Oh?" Tom asked. "Why is that?" "With Janice's new position in your life, there will be a lot of changes," Darren announced before Eva could respond. "She's here to help you adjust." "Adjust? Why should I have to adjust to my wife's promotion?" Tom asked, more than concerned. He looked at Janice, expecting an explanation, but none came. "It's complicated," Darren stated flatly. "Let's have breakfast first, shall we? Maybe we can get to know each other a bit before we get down to business." They sat down as Darren's staff wheeled carts into the room. Before Tom's eyes, they set dishes of eggs, bacon, toast, and fruit in front of everyone. Another staff member went around the table, pouring coffee into cups. Tom also noticed the armed guards who took up positions on both sides of the door. "So, Tom, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?" Rick Harmon, another executive director, asked. "Janice mentioned you were some kind of soldier or something like that." Tom glanced at Janice before responding. He had briefly told her about his service, but it seemed to have slipped her mind. As far as she could tell, anyone in a green uniform had served in the military. "I served in the military, but I was never just a soldier," Tom replied, taking a bite of his omelet, which he found delightful. "Oh, what were you then?" Rick asked, glancing at Janice. "I served in the Marine Corps," Tom answered. "Thank you for your service," Darren said. "What did you do in the Marines, if I may ask?" "Certainly," Tom said. "I was a reconnaissance sniper. I was assigned to a reconnaissance unit in the armed forces, where I was injured." "A reconnaissance sniper, huh?" Ryan Jones, the third leader at the table, pondered. "So, essentially, you were killing bastards. Is that right?" Tom noticed the other executives and security service personnel exchange glances before responding. "I suppose that's one way to put it," Tom said. The looks around the table turned uneasy, and Tom wondered what was going on here. 32 enemy soldiers didn't fulfill their missions, he added casually, but with a tone resembling a warning from a venomous snake. "Though it's been years since I've had to kill anyone." His military mind chastised itself. Had he revealed his position or warned them? It's interesting that you never told us about this, Janice, Darren said with a hint of tension in his voice, looking at Tom's wife, who blushed slightly. Janice isn't to blame, Tom said before Janice could speak. I never told her exactly what I did in the service. Partly because some of it is still classified, and partly because it's a period of my life I'd rather forget. But now you're an accountant. Is that right? Rick hastily interjected, stepping in to diffuse the tension that had suddenly settled over the table like a cloudy day. Yes, I was discharged after rehabilitation, and I went to college to get a business degree. That's where I met Janice. Now I'm a forensic accountant working for my father, Tom explained. What does your father do? Glenn asked. He heads Jackson's specialized investigations. Mostly corporate work, Tom replied. I've heard of them, Rick mused. From what I've heard, they do good work. They finished breakfast, engaging mainly in light conversation. But it didn't ease Tom's uneasy feeling about it all. He'd learned to trust his instincts on the battlefield, as they had saved his life more than once. Well, it looks like a beautiful day outside. Eva, why don't you give Tom a tour of the house while we head out to the backyard? Darren suggested. Of course, Eva replied. Tom glanced at Janice, trying to read her thoughts, but couldn't. Her expression was one he wouldn't want to play poker against. Go ahead, dear. Everything will be fine, she encouraged, though a bit strained. Yes, okay, Tom said. He felt uneasy in this situation, but he sensed there was little he could do right now. So, he yielded to Darren and Janice. Intelligence and reconnaissance. Intelligence and reconnaissance, he repeated to himself. Taking his cane, he looked at Eva. Are you ready, Tom? She asked briskly, a liveliness he knew to be fake. Of course, Tom replied, hoping the turmoil in his stomach would settle. After you. Janice placed her hand on his shoulder before he left, causing him to stop and look at her. Just remember, I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Tom said. He leaned in to kiss her, but she turned away. Shocked and humiliated, Tom stepped back and walked away without saying a word until he and Eva were far from the main house. Tom couldn't help but notice the heavily armed guards nearby. Turning his back to Eva, Tom pulled out his phone and activated the voice recording app, noticing he somehow had 2 bars. A weak signal, but enough to make a call, then pocketed it. It's so beautiful here, Eva finally said, trying to break the ice. Yes, Tom replied evasively. They approached a wooden park bench overlooking a small pond and stopped. Eva sat down, and Tom followed suit. What's going on here? He asked. You're a smart man, Tom. Why don't you figure it out yourself? She replied. I have an idea, but it's too awful to consider, Tom replied. Why don't you just tell me everything? All right, as you know, Janice has been chosen as Darren's next executive assistant, Eva began. Yes, I already know that. Janice told me about it. But that's not all, is it? No, Eva said. Your life is about to change, Tom. Whether it's for the better will depend on how you react. You know that Janice loves you, don't you? I've heard her say it. But honestly, it's hard for me to believe right now. Trust me, she really loves you, and she wants the best for both of you. That's why she's willing to do whatever it takes to secure your future, lectured Eva. You do support your wife in her career goals, don't you? Of course, I always have, said Tom. He felt much like he did one night many years ago, slowly crawling through the ground, feeling for mines under a high-tech heat-dissipating cloak. I'm glad to hear that from you. Then you must understand that the next year or 2 will be just a minor bump on the road to a long, happy marriage. A year or 2? She mentioned 6 months. Why are you saying this? What's going to happen in the next 2 years? Tom asked pointedly. And what exactly is your role in all of this? I'll get to that. My role is to prepare you for what's coming, and to ensure that you fully understand and accept Darren's expectations. For you and your wife. Why should I care about Darren's expectations of me? I don't report to him, and he doesn't sign my paycheck, Tom growled, his patience wearing thin. No, he doesn't, but he signs hers. And your silent agreement will greatly facilitate Janice's work, explained Eva. Silent agreement? What the hell are you talking about? I'm sure you've noticed that Darren is what most people would call an alpha male, stated Eva, as if it were as obvious as a giant flashing red neon sign. In other words, he's an egotistical, self-absorbed jerk, growled Tom. Eva smirked, and it was the first genuine sound she made, and the first one he believed. Let's just say, he expects people to obey, to do what's expected of them. This includes Janice, and, as a result, you. In other words, he wants to sleep with my wife and expects me to just accept it. Isn't that what you're trying to tell me? His temperature rises, but he keeps it tightly under control. I wouldn't use that terminology, but essentially, yes. In fact, they've already been intimate several times, said Eva, noting the pained expression on Tom's face. And how do you know this? Tom asked. I was there. I recorded it, said Eva in an even tone, as if recording the sex of two people was the most natural thing one could do. Are you kidding me? Not at all, Tom. Here, take a look. Perhaps you'll find it interesting, said Eva, handing her phone to Tom. He watched a short video clip in which Janice and Darren were having sex like animals. This is interesting. Do you mind if I keep a copy? Tom asked. It could come in handy for him in case of a divorce, he thought to himself. Not at all. I saved this clip specifically for you. Using the phone's Bluetooth function, Tom saved a copy onto his own phone. Tell me something, Tom. How has your personal life been lately? Not that it's any of your damn business, but for the past couple of months, it's been practically non-existent. Why do you ask? Actually, it is my business. And the reason is simple. Darren instructed Janice to keep you at arm's length most of the time. He's very protective of his possessions. What? And she just went along with it? Tom growled through clenched teeth, his anger escalating. Of course. Now he owns her. She obeys him just like all his previous assistants did. And he'll expect you to report to him as well. Tom bristled at the word owns. He can expect in one hand and crap in the other. Let's see which one fills up first, Tom snarled through clenched teeth. He saw a smirk on her face and had the urge to wipe it off with the back of his hand. So what does this jerk expect from me? Money? Unlikely, chuckled Eva. He expects obedience from you. Your submission. And he'll expect you to publicly demonstrate that tonight in front of the other senior partners. What are you talking about? What does he want from me? The dynamics of your marriage will drastically change while Janice is in her current position. To reflect this, Darren has documents for you to sign. These documents state that you voluntarily transfer your marital rights, property, and assets to him while Janice serves as his assistant. After he gets what he wants from you, he expects you to kneel before him in front of your wife and everyone else. And he expects you to perform oral sex on him. In conclusion, Eva said with an indifferent expression, I know it's difficult to hear, but this is what Janice expects from you. In fact, she's eager to see you do it. This way, you'll relinquish all authority in your marriage to him as long as he sees fit to possess her. Let me make sure I understood correctly what you just said. Your despicable boss wants me to sign everything over to him, allow him to have his way with me, and then perform oral sex on him? In front of Janice and the other executives? Are you kidding me? Tom growled, his eyes gleaming with anger. I'm not joking, Tom. Yes, that's what he wants. He also expects you to swallow. And Janice too. Of course, the entire encounter will be recorded on video. Of course. That way, he can hold it over my head. Sounds like extortion or blackmail to me. In your words, it sounds distasteful. But it would be used to keep you in check, Eve said nonchalantly. After you submit to him, he'll take Janice to bed. Tomorrow morning, they'll head to New York for the weekend. And where will I be while they're screwing around in New York? Tom asked. You'll stay here, locked in your room. You'll be fed and looked after. When they return, you'll drive Janice back to your residence. You'll follow her instructions exactly, without asking questions, Eve replied. So, if I understand correctly, I'm supposed to be literally screwed over, forced to perform oral sex on that jerk, and then held here as a hostage against my will. And what do I get out of this? If you agree to Darren's program, you'll remain relatively unscathed, aside from a bit of humiliation. And when he's done with Janice, you'll receive good compensation. So, you idiots conspired with my soon-to-be ex-wife to destroy my marriage, take away the business of my entire life, and literally rape me. Is that right? I wouldn't phrase it quite like that, but I suppose from your perspective, yes. We've been working on this together, said Eva in a neutral tone. Did he do this with his other assistants? Asked Tom. Yes, said Eva. And they agreed to this crap? They did, Eva told him. In fact, their husbands thoroughly enjoyed it. What harm could it do? Janice would be pleased to see you bring pleasure to her master. I'm sure she would do just that. They both can kiss my ass and bugger off, hissed Tom. And you can tell that asshole if he tries to come after me, I'll do everything in my power to make sure it's the last thing he ever does. I understand you're angry, Tom. And you have every right to be. But in the end, you would win. In many respects, not just one. But that's not all. More? Tom asked, astonished. The document requires you to undergo a vasectomy at the earliest opportunity. And it states that you will accept and take responsibility for any children Janice and Darren produce. In fact, she intends to put on a show, washing out her contraceptives after you sign. And what if I don't agree to all this shit? Let's just say you wouldn't like the consequences, stated Eva. Some have tried to fight Darren and ended up penniless, while those convicted of sexual crimes ended up in prison for illegal pornography found on their personal devices by chance. And you may know what happens to people convicted of sexual crimes in prison. Not a pleasant existence. That sounds like a threat, replied Tom. Call it what you want. Fine, I will, replied Tom, taking out his phone from his pocket. He paused, saved the audio recording, and scrolled through his contacts until he found what he was looking for. Making sure there was a signal, he dialed the number he needed and held the phone to his ear. What are you doing? Asked Eva, her face reddening with anger. Tom smiled and put his finger to his lips, signaling her to keep quiet. Sheriff Jackson, said the man who answered Tom's call. Uncle Bob, how are you doing? Tom asked. Stonewall, what's going on? Dad was right. I need an extraction. Quickly. Do you have the address? I understand, son. I also have the coordinates from your phone. What's your plan? I've counted at least 15 heavily armed men. There's a gate at the entrance. The code is 6973, unless they've changed it since last night. Here's Hansen and 3 of his leaders, plus his trainer. She just outlined the situation to me, so to speak. I recorded all of this on audio. I'll send it to you, Tom said. Understood, Bob replied. We're already on our way. Estimated arrival time is about 5 minutes. Can you hold on that long? I think so, Uncle Bob. As long as you're ready to call it self-defense, Tom said. And thank you. Glad to help. I wouldn't want anything to happen to my favorite nephew. What about Janice? According to Hansen's trainer, she's a collaborator. Already a toy for Hansen, Tom said. I'm sorry to hear that, son, Bob said sadly. Yeah, me too, Tom said. Well, young man, you're doing great. We'll be there soon. With these words, Tom ended the call and then sent the audio file to his uncle. What did you just do? Asked a frightened Eva after Tom hung up. Who did you just call? I called in the cavalry, Tom replied with a smile. I need to get back inside and warn the others, muttered Eva, starting to get up, clearly disoriented by the turn of events. Tom shook his head and gently guided her back onto the bench. She stared at his sniper-like expression with horror and admiration. I don't think so. We'll sit here and enjoy the sunshine for a few minutes. It might be the last sunlight you see for a while, said Tom, allowing himself a satisfied smile. I think this time, Darren, you may have bitten off more than you can chew, said Ryan after Janice and 4 men took their places by the large pool behind Darren's house. Why? Because Janice's cuckold is a former Marine? Big deal, Darren smirked. And anyway, what is he going to do? He's alone, unarmed and surrounded by a small platoon of armed guards. If he rejects Eva's offer, then we go to plan B. Just be careful, Rick cautioned. Don't worry, Darren said. I have everything under control. We'll get him drunk tonight and when the time comes, he'll gladly do whatever I want. I can't wait to see that, Janice chuckled. Are you going to make him swallow, like you did with the others? Of course, Darren said. By the time this weekend is over, your little weakling will be begging me, he added, making Janice giggle like a schoolgirl. Just don't push him too hard, Ryan said. He's not like the others. They were weak. This one isn't. They're all the same, Darren chuckled. No, that's not true. This guy is a Marine, trained to kill. You should be prepared for anything. Relax, Ryan. I'll handle it, Darren grumbled. But I'm curious about something. Why didn't you know about your husband's service? He asked Janice. Well, it's just like Tom said. He never told me any details, Janice replied. All he could say was that he served in the army. It doesn't matter, Darren snorted. He's going down tonight, and your career will skyrocket. What if he files for divorce? Janice asked. Then I'll destroy him just like I destroyed the others. He'll go to jail for illegal pornography or worse. Don't worry, darling. I'll take care of him. What's that sound? Glenn asked, looking around. Everyone fell silent and listened. The distinct sounds of helicopters could be heard around them. Suddenly, one of Darren's guards ran up to the pool. We have a problem, Mr. Hansen, he said irritably. What is it? Darren asked. They heard shouts and sounds of a scuffle between men. Then they saw 2 police officers in uniforms and bulletproof vests approaching the pool with rifles at the ready. "Halt," ordered one of the sheriff's deputies. "Drop your weapons," said the deputy to Darren's guard, who immediately complied, not wanting to be shot. Other sheriff's deputies entered, handcuffing Janice, Darren, and the other 3 men. "What's going on?" demanded Darren. "I'll have your badges for this." "Quiet. You're all under arrest," declared the sheriff's deputy, before reading out a detailed list of charges. He concluded by reading them their rights. The sheriff's deputies escorted all 5 detainees around the building, where they saw 4 helicopters, a bus, and 3 large vans. Officers were everywhere, accompanying handcuffed and disarmed security personnel to the bus. Janice spotted Tom standing next to a burly man in khaki uniform. "Tom, what's happening?" she cried out. Tom and the burly man approached her. "Your little party is over, Janice," Tom said calmly. "Sorry, I forgot my manners. Janice, this is Sheriff Robert. Jackson, you remember my Uncle Bob, right?" "Uncle Bob?" Janice gasped weakly. "I didn't know you were the sheriff." "I guess that slipped your mind," Bob said with a smirk. "Tom, please. This is all a huge misunderstanding. You have to believe me," Janice exclaimed desperately. "No, Janice. I don't have to believe you. In fact, I don't think I've ever been more shocked and disappointed in my life. I'll visit my lawyer as soon as possible to start divorce proceedings. From this moment on, you're dead to me," Tom said. "You understand? Dead." With these words, Tom grabbed her left hand, removed the rings, and pocketed them. "You son of a bitch," Darren growled, futilely trying to break free from the grip of the 2 sheriff's deputies holding him. "I'll be out of jail in no time. And then I'll fucking kill you. You hear me, you fucking piece of shit?" "Sounds like a threat to me. What do you think, Uncle Bob?" Tom asked with a smirk that surpassed all of Darren's previous malice. "Of course, I thought so too," Bob said. "We'll just add this to all the other charges against him, and it'll help ensure he's never released on bail. Don't worry, Mr. Hanson. My boys will take good care of you," he smirked. "And your friends. Take these people and get out of here," he ordered the sheriff's deputies, who immediately complied. Tom and Bob watched as the criminals were loaded onto the bus. To Tom, the past few years of his life seemed like a lie. He had loved Janice since the day they met. Bob patted him on the shoulder. "It'll all work out, son. Believe me," he said. Bob had gone through a divorce with an unfaithful wife many years ago and knew the pain Tom was feeling. "Thank you, Uncle Bob, for everything. Don't mention it, son. If you need anything, give me a call. And give your dad my regards. I think he's got a bottle of his best wine waiting for your visit." "I'll do just that. Is it safe for me to collect my things? I need to get out of here, to hell with it." "Of course. I think they're almost done inside that place anyway," Bob told him. After they said goodbye, Tom gathered his belongings and headed home. A week later, meeting with his father, Tom met with the family lawyer and filed divorce papers according to the prenuptial agreement they signed before the wedding. He waited for them to be processed before visiting Janice in county jail. "This will be the first and only time I visit you, Janice," he said when she took her place. "By law, I have to make sure you have the documents." "I've got them," Janice said quietly. "I've already signed and sent them back." "Good. As you might have noticed, I followed the prenuptial agreement. I'll wait for your trial to get rid of your things." "I appreciate it," said Janice. "There's something I don't understand. How did you find out?" "You'll hear all the gory details in court, so I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I suspected something was up a couple of months before that weekend, but I didn't have any proof. About 4 months before that memorable day, Darren's ex-husband of one of his so-called assistants came to Dad with a rather wild story. He also brought some spreadsheets and documents that, according to him, his ex-wife obtained from Darren's system. Dad made me go through the spreadsheets to see what I could find. Naturally, I couldn't tell you anything about privileges, conflicts of interest, and the like. It took some time, but we finally found what we were looking for: evidence of all sorts of shady financial dealings with some rather dubious characters. Your lover did a great job hiding them, but not well enough. A couple of weeks before that weekend, Dad handed over everything he had to the feds, who were more than interested in Hanson's affairs. In fact, they were planning a raid on your offices sometime in June. Dad told me to be very careful that weekend. He relayed what his informant had told him, though he found it very hard to believe. We talked to my Uncle Bob, who, as you know, is the sheriff of the county where Darren's property is located. I was hoping nothing would happen, but it didn't turn out that way. Eva Carson told me about your plans with your lover. By the way, I recorded that little conversation. I'm glad we live in a state where only one party's consent is needed for such recordings. Nevertheless, I have a few questions for you. What do you want to know? Asked Janice. How long before that weekend did you start sleeping with your so-called boss? About 2 months, Janice answered. Tom was surprised at how frank she was being. Around that time, everything started to go wrong for us. Did he order you to cut off communication with me? Yes, she said quietly, her face turning red. Then, I probably should get tested for sexually transmitted infections, Tom said, causing Janice even more embarrassment. Did you really want me to be so intimate with your lover? Janice lowered her eyes, refusing to meet her husband's gaze. Well, he pressed angrily. She looked at him again, tears welling up in her eyes. And again, yes, she said. Of course, you knew I would never willingly agree to that. I would prefer to die first. So why? Because I was so in love with Darren that I would have agreed to anything he wanted. You don't understand. He enjoyed having power over everyone around him. And if I hadn't complied? He had what he called a plan B, Janice admitted. You mean drugs? Yes, they found a vial of chemicals he intended to use against me. I had nothing to do with that, Janice declared. That's interesting because they found your fingerprints all over the bottle, Tom said, making Janice look at him in shock. Which tells me you were part of his conspiracy against me. No, I never wanted to hurt you, she sobbed. The evidence says otherwise, Janice. You not only cheated on me, you conspired with your so-called master to destroy me as a man. So, there's no turning back? No, never. No forgiveness. Nothing. Like I told you that day, you're dead to me. Crap, Tom hissed as Janice shed hot tears but remained unmoved. I've already spent enough time on you. Goodbye, Janice. Enjoy what's left of your pathetic life. With those words, he stood up and walked away, unaffected by her tears. After several court appearances, Janice, Darren, Eva, and others were found guilty on all charges brought against them. As the ringmaster, Darren received a life sentence in federal prison, meaning he would never be eligible for parole. Playing minor roles in Darren's illegal financial schemes, the 3 executives were sentenced to 20 years in prison. Eva and Janice received lighter sentences for their involvement in Darren's schemes. Several other employees of the firm faced charges for their involvement in the conspiracy. A few individuals supported the state's case against Darren and received immunity as part of plea deals. By the time the smoke cleared, the Remington legal group no longer existed. Tom's divorce from Janice proceeded quickly and smoothly. Due to Janice's incarceration, Tom packed up all her belongings and placed them in storage for her parents to retrieve at their convenience. On the 4th of July, Tom, his father, and Bob celebrated Independence Day like the rest of the nation, with a barbecue and fireworks. Bob brought a guest to the celebration and introduced her to Tom. He was instantly charmed by the attractive, slim brunette with caramel-colored eyes standing before him, finding it hard not to stare at her toned legs accentuated by a pair of shorts. Son, this is Marcia Simmons. She just moved here from Dallas and started working with me a couple of weeks ago. Are you a deputy sheriff? Tom asked. Sure am, Marcia said confidently, her face lighting up with a smile. She's also a former Marine, Bob added. Just like your dad here. Marcia, my nephew also served in the Corps. Force Recon Sniper. Semper Fi, Marcia said. Hoorah, Tom replied. I think we'll get along just fine, he said, beaming a wide smile. I think so too, Marcia agreed. Will you offer the lady a beer? Sure, Tom replied. I wouldn't mind a cold one myself. He took out 2 beers from his father's fridge and handed one to her. Your uncle told me about your last operation. Sounds like a well-executed one, Marcia said as they sat down. I'm sorry for what you had to go through with your ex. Yeah, well, I guess these things happen, Tom remarked quietly. The divorce will be final soon. What about you? I noticed a mark on your ring finger. Were you married too? Yes, I was, Marcia said. Clearly, my husband wasn't like that, if you catch my drift. One evening, I came home early and caught him in bed with his secretary. In our bed, no less. That's tough to hear. In my opinion, he was an idiot, Tom said, eyeing her figure. I agree, Marcia said. I'm just glad we didn't have kids. Do you have any children? Fortunately, no. We talked about starting a family, and then everything went to hell. Tom and Marcia spent most of the evening talking and were thrilled when Bob and Tom's father set off fireworks. By the end of the evening, Tom felt much better. At least he believed he had met a kindred spirit in Marcia. "Are you ready to head back, Marcia?" Bob asked after they finished the fireworks. "I think now is a good time," she remarked, turning to Tom. "I had a wonderful time, Tom. It was really nice to meet you." "I had a wonderful time too, Marcia. And I'm really glad to have met you. Actually, I'd like to see you again if you don't mind." "That would be more than fine, Tom," she said with a wide smile. "Here's my number," she added, handing him a card with her cell number. "Your uncle keeps me busy, but I'm usually free Saturday evenings. Give me a call." "Will do," Tom said, returning her smile. He took her card, noting his uncle's wink and smile. "I'll call you this Thursday. Then we'll talk," Marcia said before kissing him on the cheek. They said their goodbyes and left. "Pretty young lady," Tom's father said after they left. "Yes, very sweet," Tom said with a broad smile. "I hope you intend to keep your promise to her," said the elderly man. "Absolutely," Tom replied. "Good lad," his father said, patting Tom on the back. "Come on, help me clean up, and let's see if we can finish off the rest of this beer." "Are you going to give me tomorrow off to sleep in?" Tom asked. "Damn no," his father replied with a laugh. Chuckling in response, Tom joined his father, thinking about the lovely brunette with the sexiest legs he had seen in a while.